There's a lot of controversy over whether or not lithium batteries are safe for use on boats. I'm sure you've seen videos of EVs on fire after being submerged in water. If not, then you may remember the cell phones exploding in 2016. So I completely understand where the apprehension comes from. However, I'm confident that lithium batteries are a safe option for boats, and that's why we'll be putting them in our Carver motor yacht to power our Great Loop adventure. Let me dispel some of the concerns I've heard voiced and I just mentioned. The EV and the exploding batteries are lithium batteries. However, they're a different chemical composition compared to the batteries that we'll be installing, which are much safer. In fact, they are the safest one that's available on the market, and those are lithium iron phosphate batteries. It's no question that lithium batteries are lighter and more energy dense than other battery technologies on the market. More stored power in a smaller footprint is ideal for smaller spaces on boats, and the weight savings just adds to it. Here you can see what 460 usable amp hours of lithium looks like compared to 510 usable amp hours of AGMs. By the way, the lithium weighs 97 pounds and the AGMs are 648 pounds. Talk about a huge difference. Now, after traveling full-time for over 3 years in an RV and the camper van Ogre, I know what it's like to live off-grid on solar systems that I designed and installed. So going into designing the solar system for our Carver motor yacht, I kind of knew what I was going to need to power the loads inside the boat, because we're planning to stay on the hook, aka we won't be in the marinas, we won't have electrical hookups or anything, so we have to provide power to our house somehow. Which brings me to today's sponsor, me. That's right, I purchased the Epoch batteries, I'm making this content, and it's free for you. So if it does meet your standards, do me a favor, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, or even better, share it in your favorite group or forum. Thanks. And the answer is battery power. Specifically, we'll be going with Epoch's Elite 12 volt 460 amp hour batteries, and we'll be going with 2 of these bad boys. The reason that I'm going with these batteries are a multitude of reasons. The main one being that they actually meet the ABYC criteria to be in a boat. So that means they do meet the UL ratings. I think they have multiple UL ratings if I'm not mistaken. The BMS meets the right criteria. You can actually see the heat sink for the BMS right on top, which is really cool. Plus it has the Victron communication built in, so this will network into my system to provide audible alarms and also allow me to remotely see what's going on with the batteries. If I'm, say in town and the boat is on the dock or on the hook somewhere, I can kind of check on the batteries in the solar system remotely, which I really like that feature. On top of that, it has, a lot of great features as well, right? It's got an 11-year warranty. It has Bluetooth built in, so you can use an app. It has heaters built in, so when we go to Canada later in the summer, we'll have to worry about the battery getting too cold and it can still be charged, in cooler weather. And the main thing that I really like about it is it's IP67 waterproof. Now, that is something that I have an entire story about. I'm sure you've seen the thumbnail. Let's jump into that. In September of 2024, Hurricane Helene struck the west coast of Florida. I had a client who had his fifth wheel RV at the MacDill Air Force Base, which is on the west coast. Unfortunately, MacDill Air Force Base suffered record-breaking storm surge. Actually, it was over 7.5 feet, and that RV got partially flooded. I'll show some pictures of the RV so you can kind of understand where the batteries were located. In the front of the RV, there are 2 sets of bays. There's an upper and there's a lower. Now, the 2 Epoch batteries, which are lithium iron phosphate batteries, were located in the lower bay towards the driver's side of the RV, and above that in the larger bay is where the majority of the electrical components were located. In this picture of the upper bay, you'll notice that the floor is rusty because the water was just barely over the bottom of the metal floor, and if we zoom in, you'll actually see kind of the flood line of where the water got up to before it receded. Now, since the batteries were located below this, they were actually underwater, and they were probably underwater for 2 or 3 days. And that's crazy. These are lithium iron phosphate batteries. You shouldn't mix electricity and water, right? So these batteries were underwater for a few days, and this happened in September. The client reached out and said, hey, this is what happened to my RV. What do you think we should do? That kind of thing. And so I told him, you need to properly dispose of the lithium batteries. Do not turn them on. Don't use them or anything like that. You need to get them out of there and get rid of them. If we fast forward to January of 2025, so about 3 months later, by this point, the client had had some repairs done via insurance, to the bottom of the RV because it didn't mess up the inside. It was just like the axles and the underneath, and of course the batteries themselves. So when he came over to the shop for me to look over the rest of the electrical system and kind of figure out what did and didn't need to be replaced due to the flooding, when he showed up, he dropped the RV. So he put down the big jacks, lifted this very heavy, very big RV off of the back of the truck, and he opened up the bay. At that time, I realized he was using one of the Epoch batteries from back in September that was completely submerged to power the RV. Now, chatting with him, I learned that he did completely disconnect them. However, when the dealer was doing some work, I guess they needed to put the slides in and out. And so instead of just getting a battery and using that, they actually hooked one of the batteries back up, the lithium batteries that were submerged, turned it on, and have been using that to power the jacks, to move it around, get the slides in and out, and whatever they need to do while they were doing repairs. I can't even explain how shocked I was that this battery was still functioning, right? Then this just leads to the IP67 rating. I mean, they truly can hold up to being underwater, which is just wild. I would never recommend this, but it's crazy that this battery was still functioning. Not only was it still functioning, when he got there, I'll throw a picture up. I screenshotted the actual app, so the Bluetooth was still working. The battery was taking a charge. It was still showing that it had over 460 amp hours of capacity. And in fact, when I went inside and looked at the touchscreen on the Victron system, I could see that his air conditioner was running, the solar was working, and so basically the battery was still being charged even though the entire system was running off of this single Epoch 460 amp hour 12 volt battery. I don't know how to explain anymore that I feel that the lithium iron phosphate batteries are safe to be put in boats. I do not plan to have our batteries to be underwater. I'm definitely going to take precautions to make sure they're elevated, and so in the bilge area they don't have any exposure to water or anything like that, and I am going to follow all of the ABYC criteria. However, if they were to have some type of incident, I feel very, very safe with these batteries based on the actual first-hand experience. I mean, take a look at the connections. When I moved one of the big wires, I think it was 2-watt cabling, the actual lug itself, which we use tinned copper lugs. These things are thick. You can't easily move these things. This was on the battery post, and when I grabbed the cable, it felt like tin foil. I mean, it literally just bent and pretty much fell apart in my hand. I'll throw some pictures up of that. And it had eaten the hex head into a circle. So, I mean, the electrolysis was trying its best to destroy that battery, and it was still functioning several months later. Just a crazy testimony. I don't know really how else to put it across. I think it's good to go. That experience is why I'll be going with Epoch's 12 volt 460 amp hour batteries for my house battery bank. In fact, we'll be doing 2 of those for 920 amp hours total. And I'll be replacing our cranking batteries as well. So we're going to swap out the cranking batteries for Epoch's 120 amp hour dual purpose cranking batteries. We'll have 2 of those also. So we'll actually have 240 amp hours for cranking batteries that we can also pull off of in an emergency, and 920 amp hours for our house battery bank. Now, one of the ABYC recommendations, not requirements, but recommendations, is that you're able to power your critical loads, like your VHF radio and other safety stuff, navigation and those kinds of things, off of a second set of batteries, especially if you're going with lithium. And we'll be able to do just that. We'll be able to power that off of the house battery bank normally, and if for some reason those fail or we have issues, we can easily swap over and use our cranking batteries, which is 240 amp hours of capacity just by themselves. And if we have problems with those for some reason, and we can't crank our 4-cylinder Yanmars or our 3-cylinder West Brake generator, then we can actually use the Epoch 460s for cranking those. Now, I do want to point out that the Epoch 460s are not made for cranking engines. However, I have personal experience with clients who have a big inline 6 or V8 diesel engine for a motorhome, like a big diesel pusher, like a tour bus. Think about a band tour bus. And they've literally had to crank their engine off of their Epoch 460s because their cranking batteries were dead, and so they use the Epochs to be able to crank. So I know that we'll be able to use either one for both scenarios, to crank the engines or to run our critical loads if we have any issues with either battery bank. I anticipate these batteries powering our Great Loop adventure for at least the next year. So if you're looking for updates about the lithium batteries, or you just want to follow our Great Loop adventure, which most of the content is going to be about, make sure that you subscribe. Do me a favor and share this in your favorite cruising or sailing group. It really helps us because we're a tiny channel and it helps us get out there. After all, this video is sponsored by me.
And me.
And that means that any money we make off of this goes into fuel in the tank, and they're pretty big diesel tanks. Why am I thinking about this? If you're worried about our tanks like we are, and you want to help put some fuel into them, and you're considering upgrading to an Epoch lithium battery, do us a favor and use our affiliate links linked in the comments and the description of this video. Don't forget to check out our website, and we'll see you on the water very, very soon.